Before we start, we would like to begin by acknowledging that the Quebec Community Groups Network and its member organizations carry out their activities on partially unceded lands and territories, which were the traditional homes and gathering places for many Indigenous nations, whose presence here reaches back to time immemorial. The QCGN acknowledges our First Nations have a long and rich history of occupation and stewardship of these lands that long served as a site of meeting and exchange among nations. The QCGN's recognition and respect for the history of First Nations and Inuit people is an important step towards building trust and creating renewing relationships with contemporary Indigenous peoples and communities. So welcome everyone to the Quebec Community Groups Network Policy Forum, English-speaking Quebec at a crossroads. For those who do not know me, my name is Sylvia Martin-Laforge and I'm the Director General of the QCGN. Thank you for joining us. We have a range of presentations and panels scheduled for this morning. In just a few minutes, we will be hearing from QCGN's Interim President Eva Ludvig, followed by a few words from the Commissioner of Official Languages, Monsieur Raymond Théberge. After a short break, we will be listening in on Quebec in Transition, a panel moderated by Professor Emeritus Richard Bourris. Afterwards, we will have a second panel lined up to discuss English-speaking Quebec in the face of change, moderated by Dr. Lorraine O'Donnell. To conclude the morning, colleague Mitra Thompson, Project Manager, Access to Justice in English, will present the Access to Justice Online Resource Center. A few hygiene notes, housekeeping I'd like to cover. As this conference is set up as a Zoom webinar, only panelists, moderators, and speakers will be able to speak and be seen on camera. All participant cameras and microphones will not be activated. This will be for periods of time for you, the audience. There will be periods of time for you, the audience, to ask questions to the panelists. At those moments, you will be prompted to put your question in the Q&A function on the bottom of the screen. Please keep all questions relevant to the topic, short, and for discussion of the panel. Time permitting, panelists will do their best to answer as many as possible. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties, please send an email to events@qcgn.ca. So Eva Ludvig, our interim president, introduced last night by outgoing President Marlene Jennings, an important contributor to the English-speaking community for many, many years at the Commissioner of Official Languages Office, now on the board at the QCGN for almost 6 years, and now doing her duty as interim president. Eva, I pass it over to you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Good morning, everyone. Bonjour à tous et toutes. Welcome to the annual conference of the Quebec Community Groups Network, and as my first as QCGN president. Sylvia noted, my name is Eva Ludvig, and I look forward to working with all of you as we strive to build an inclusive Quebec, where our rights are respected and our aspirations recognized. For those who don't know me, I have been a member of the board of QCGN since 2017. Sylvia got that right. And have been an executive committee member shortly thereafter. While I am now retired, I spent 20 years, 2 decades, as the Quebec representative of the Commissioner of Official Languages. In that capacity, I worked with many of the community organizations that are represented here today, and met with members of the Quebec's English-speaking community in every region of the province. And what a beautiful province it is. Before focusing on QCGN's jam-packed agenda, I would like to thank Marlene on behalf of all of us for her outstanding leadership over the past 2 years. As was mentioned last night, she succeeded in bringing our community together and has been an effective and consistent voice on our behalf. And if you have a chance, and I hope QCGN makes this possible, you should listen to a song by Jack Jedwab based on Frank Sinatra's I Did It My Way, but I did it, obviously it says she did it her way. It's a gem. Marlene also helped set the foundation for QCGN's continued success by advancing our renewal project. For all of this, we are grateful. Thank you, Marlene. As I begin my mandate, we face a disturbing and persistent disinformation campaign out of Quebec City, as well as the threat in Ottawa of a shift in the approach to official language communities. As we have done for the many past many months, the QCGN will be at the forefront of building public awareness and opposition to what is going on in both capitals. On the positive side of the ledger, since our march and rally several weeks ago, there seems to be a greater appreciation and awareness of our community and our contribution as Quebecers. We are determined to build on this. But let's start with Quebec City. Bill 96 was passed on May 24th, as you all know. Within days, the Legault government's disingenuous communications campaign accusing us of misinformation. His government, at taxpayers' expense, sponsored full-page ads in major newspapers, the Montreal Gazette, the Globe and Mail, the Sherbrooke Record. To put it politely, the ads were misleading, or shall we call it, going into the world of alternative facts. Every point made in the ad is simply wrong. As the Coalition for Quality Healthcare points out, English-speaking Quebecers will not continue to have access to health services in English as we have been used to. In an open letter, they wrote, and I quote, "Comme il n'y a pas d'exemption explicite du système de santé et des services sociaux, les immigrants se verraient refuser l'accès à des services d'interprétation ou à des services dans leur langue maternelle seulement 6 mois après leur arrivée. En outre, des centaines de milliers de personnes qui ne sont pas considérées comme des anglophones historiques se verraient également refuser l'accès." Contrary to what the ad pretends, our schools and colleges are at risk due to Bill 96. In fact, the English Montreal School Board is taking the government to court, arguing that Bill 96 contravenes our right to manage and control our school system, as is protected by the Canadian Constitution. The bill originally capped enrollment in our colleges and CEGEPs at an annual growth rate of 8.7%. But due to a CAC amendment, it is now frozen at current levels in perpetuity. This will stifle innovation and severely limit the introduction of new programming. As for access to justice, I will give you a heads up. Let's wait and see what Julius Gray has to say about that. And in fact, there was an article in this morning's Gazette about the possibility of various court challenges. With regards to the rights of the First Nations and the Inuit communities, Mohawk Council of Ganawagway Grand Chief Sky Deer says, "This," and I quote, "this is attempted assimilation and cultural genocide. We see these kinds of bills and it indicates to us that the government is claiming supremacy over us, like our laws, traditions, and cultures don't matter. When settlers first came here, we set up a relationship and a partnership, and we feel those principles are being dismissed and violated, like we don't matter," end of quote. And finally, the Premier is calling on us to trust the Office québécois de la langue française, better known as OQLF, not to abuse its new powers, allowing it to conduct searches without a warrant and based on anonymous complaint. Really? Just let's think of Pastigate. But as I said earlier, there is some reason for optimism. We had an impressive and diverse crowd at our rally, which was organized by QCGN in partnership with the English Parents Committee Association, the Quebec English School Board Association, and the Quebec Federation of Home and Schools. And it got people talking. Within our own community, from the townships to Gatineau, from parents to teachers and students, and from new Canadians to members of our First Nations, it showed our commitment to an inclusive and modern Quebec, a Quebec where our rights are recognized and respected. Mais il s'agit aussi d'un Québec où le français est la langue commune, où nous sommes de plus en plus à l'aise de vivre et de travailler en français. Selon un rapport publié récemment, 8 élèves de primaire sur 10 qui ont le droit de fréquenter une école anglaise optent pour une école d'immersion. Et c'est la communauté anglophone qui a commencé l'immersion à Saint-Lambert au début des années 60. Et de tous les articles, voici mon préféré, celui de Rima El-Khoury dans la presse intitulé « Nous ne sommes pas des anecdotes », qu'elle a écrit en réponse à un commentaire maladroit de notre Premier ministre. But as I said, and I continue to say, I am an optimistic person. So in looking ahead, we will continue to fight Bill 96 on multiple fronts. Our multi-phase program of resistance includes some of the following. We are closely monitoring the implementation of Bill 96 and will be highlighting the impact it is having on individual Quebecers. Later on today, our team will be showing how individual Quebecers can bring issues to our attention through our Access to Justice website. We are determined to maintain and enhance our social media community. We will collaborate with those launching court challenges. And finally, we are developing strategies and tactics to ensure that Bill 96, and for that matter, Bills 21 and 40, are not forgotten in the upcoming election. L'autre bonne nouvelle est que nous semblons avoir l'attention de plusieurs personnalités au Canada anglais. Au cours des dernières semaines, le Globe and Mail a publié des éditoriaux favorables et réfléchis. Des chroniqueurs ont pris la parole. Quant au ministère de la Justice du Canada, il a indiqué qu'en ce qui concerne le projet de la loi 21, le gouvernement fédéral interviendra devant le Cour suprême, une démarche qui nous donne de l'espoir pour le projet de la loi 96. But we do have other issues in Ottawa as well. The federal government is fundamentally changing the way it approaches official languages. And the QCGN has been aggressively defending the interests of English-speaking Quebecers in these national conversations. There is a realignment underway that will reshape the Official Languages Act in ways that we feel will diminish our long-standing relationship with the Government of Canada and leave us vulnerable. Right now, C-13 is proposing a new federal law that will create new language rights for Francophones in their private communications with federally regulated businesses. The QCGN is fighting hard to make sure our minority community of 1.1 million people is also extended these same rights. In fact, I will be appearing with the Honorable Joan Fraser and our counsel, Marion Sandilands, before the Senate Committee on Monday to address these issues, and you can be sure that they will hear our objections loud and clear. And I suppose to add sort of a cherry on the sundae, just this morning in La Presse and on Radio-Canada, we learned that the Quebec Minister Sonia Labelle, who is responsible for federal-provincial relations in Quebec, has sent a list of 14 amendments to the House of Commons on official languages with what Quebec wants to see in C13, which modernizes, as you know, the Official Languages Act, and as I mentioned, creates new rights to Francophones only in communication with federally regulated businesses. These recommendations have not been shared publicly and are not even available on the committee's website. However, from the Radio-Canada report, it is clear that the CAQ government's war on the English-speaking community continues, as is its assault on all our rights. There are no surprises here. Quebec wants exclusive jurisdiction over matters of language and culture within the province, and it wants Ottawa to abandon its constitutional obligations towards Canada's official languages and English-speaking community. Some of the elements or the proposed amendments include promoting only French, prioritizing and French even in Quebec, in making it more apparent, more sort of like the way it is right now, where it has to have be bigger compared to the smaller. All this is an example of the fundamental shift in Canada's approach to official languages, first proposed by Mélanie Joly and now being championed by the current government. The Official Languages Act is being transformed into legislation whose sole purpose is to protect and promote French, not law that gives life to the Constitution's linguistic rights and balances. If the federal government caves to this pressure, it does not stand up for and defend the Constitution as its areas of jurisdiction. If it fails to champion the ideal of linguistic duality across the country. In fact, it totally changes a fundamental value for which I worked over 20 years of bilingualism in Canada, of the respect of both official languages as equal across the country. And it creates new rights for French and not English Canadians or us in Quebec. And if it does cave, then the government is abandoning the field to the CAQ government and supporting the suppression of fundamental rights and freedoms. A national consultation is underway that will shape the government's official languages strategy, called the Action Plan, in 2023. This 2.1 billion suite of programs and policies provides critical support to English-speaking Quebecers, their community sectors, organizations, and institutions. The QCGN will be facilitating our community's participation in this summer's consultations in preparation for 2023, and continuing our work with federal institutions to ensure that our needs and priorities are taken into account during the development of the next action plan. At the same time, the QCGN faces our challenges with confidence. We're taking the steps needed to strengthen our organization. On May 26th, our members came together for a special meeting and voted to approve QCGN's new mission, vision, values, and principles and pillars, and to adopt amended bylaws. We are now working on bringing these important changes to life, and a transition committee chaired by Board Secretary Matt Aronson is steering the process as we update our governance and operations. This includes the adoption of new policies, the implementation of a new strategic plan, adjustments to government and election process, and eventually, for the first time, the introduction of individual membership. We want to widen the tent. All of this is to come to fruition when we meet this fall for our annual general meeting. So as you can see, we have much work to do between now and then. Our plate is full and the stakes have rarely been higher. Success depends on all of us continuing to work together, on staying focused on our common priorities, and on building bridges with like-minded Quebecers. Thank you, and I wish you an invigorating and inspiring session today. And on that note, I would like to introduce the Commissioner of Official Languages, Monsieur Raymond Théberge, to address us. Thank you, Monsieur Théberge, for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Eva. Bonjour à tous. Hello, everyone. As I am addressing you from Winnipeg, I would like to begin by acknowledging that I am currently on a Treaty 1 territory, and that the land is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dani peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. To begin, I'd like to thank QCGN for the invitation to speak with you today about the recent public opinion research on official languages that my office conducted with Environics. QCGN has been conducting some impressive policy work of late, which has led to this conference. I would like to take this opportunity to thank your outgoing President, Marlene Jennings, for her dedicated and tireless work on your behalf. It has always been a great pleasure to discuss and work with her. I'd like to open with a quote from that great Canadian poet and English-speaking Quebecer, Leonard Cohen. It's a quote about belonging, that challenge of finding your place as a member of a minority community. In a society like that of Canada and of Quebec, the former being officially bilingual, the latter being officially unilingual, and both being increasingly multicultural. I quote, "I live in Montreal, which is a French city, in Quebec, which is a French country. I live as a minority writer, almost in exile. These are very special Canadian problems, which to me from the Canadian character, because we're very much involved in this notion of what is minority and what is majority. And yet, while these questions are in the air, it seems that everyone has space, because we don't have the melting pot notion at all in Canada. We have a federal system that runs right down the psyche of the country," end of quote. As Cohen reminds us, these inherent characteristics of our society need not be seen as incompatible, even though at times like today, it may seem that way. Rather, I would argue that these characteristics are part of the dynamic pressure that makes ours a fascinating and vibrant, if at times argumentative, country to live in. That's what the results I will present to you tend to show. It seems to me that it's not exactly easy to be an Anglo-Quebecer these days. Recent discourse around language rights raised valid concerns. In light of Quebec's Bill 96 and Ottawa's Bill C-13, some have discussed these concerns with me, and I take them seriously. C'est pourquoi tenter le pouls de la population canadienne en général, tout comme celle du Québec, par le moyen de notre sondage est essentiel à ces discussions. Indeed, our survey of 3,000 Canadians conducted by telephone and online in September and October of last year shows that the national consensus in favor of our two official languages has held. The naysayers, although loud and never shy about sharing their negative views, clearly do not speak for any one particular group or region. For clarity, I'll be referencing the telephone survey results unless stated otherwise. Also, I'll be using the terms Anglophone and Francophone throughout this speech to refer loosely to those who have one language or the other as their primary official language, and not necessarily as their mother tongue. It was in this vein that the great Frank Scott, himself an English-speaking Quebecer, used the term Anglophone. It is also closer to the definition the federal government uses when assessing the needs of linguistic communities. Now, onto the survey results. In the telephone survey, which was a random probability survey with a 2.5% margin of error, support for the objectives of the Official Languages Act was over 80% among English, French, and other mother tongue populations, younger and older adults, racialized groups, people born in and outside of Canada, and among Western Canadians, Ontarians, Atlantic Canadians, and most notably, Quebecers. The results nationally at 87% were virtually unchanged from what they were 5 years ago when it stood at 88%. We have experienced a lot of things in the last half decade: a creeping populist majoritarian discourse, a proliferation of disinformation on social media, undermining trust in academia, journalism, science, and government, a once-in-a-century global pandemic that has stretched the patience and tolerance of us all. Despite all of this, an overwhelming majority continues to support Canadian bilingualism, one of the core principles that lie at the heart of Canadian diversity, inclusiveness, and human rights. The survey also found that support for official languages is consistent with support for other forms of diversity. Too often, we read commentary that reduces diversity to a zero-sum game, weighing different minorities against each other, not for the purposes of expanding language rights, but rather to roll them back. That is why I'm encouraged that our respondents see linguistic duality and diversity as complementary rather than opposite. For instance, most agree that having two official languages sends the signal that we value linguistic diversity, makes Canada a welcoming place for immigrants, and enhances the multicultural reality of our country. Significantly, support for these ideas was similar among Anglophones and Francophones, and among Canadians who are themselves of diverse backgrounds, including visible minorities, immigrants, and those with a mother tongue other than French or English. Perhaps more encouragingly, in the context of reconciliation, 78% agreed that Canada can and should promote both official languages and Indigenous language at the same time. Throughout the survey, Quebecers stood out in their strong levels of support for federal bilingualism, in their rates of individual bilingualism, in their support for second language education, and significantly in their support for official language minorities too. This may come as a bit of a surprise to some of us, but again, we must not take for granted that the loud and angry few speak for the quiet, moderate majority. Taking a closer look at the results among Quebecers, support for the Official Languages Act was extremely high, at 95%, which was even higher than in 2016 at 92%. Why is this? Why do Quebecers continue to be such strong supporters of federal official bilingualism? Surveys don't ask people why, but allow me to engage in some speculation. C'est peut-être en raison de la situation minoritaire à laquelle font face ces deux groupes de langue officielles au Québec. Les Québécois francophones, qui font partie d'une minorité pan-canadienne, espèrent, et à juste titre, que l'on protège et qu'on appuie leur langue dans l'ensemble du Canada, y compris au Québec. And Anglophone Quebecers, who constitute a minority within the province itself, may look to the federal level in particular to help protect and affirm their minority language rights. And perhaps, secondly, that is because of the high level of individual bilingualism among Quebecers and the extent to which they encounter the other official language. The survey showed that Quebec has by far the highest percentage of bilingual individuals. Quebecers were also far more likely than other Canadians surveyed to consume media and cultural products in their second official language, to encounter people who speak the other language, and to live in a highly bilingual community. Our survey also suggests that the Canadian identity of Quebecers is strongly informed by the fact that our country has two official languages. For example, 86% of Quebecers agreed that having two official languages is one of the things that really defines Canada, the highest percentage in any region studied. 90% of Quebecers, again, higher than anywhere else in Canada, agreed that because English and French are part of our history, it makes sense that they have equal status. Finally, 94% of Quebecers agreed that having two official languages is positive for Canada's international image. Like all Canadians, Quebecers remain highly supportive of second language education. In fact, more than the population of any other region that we studied, Quebecers agreed that more effort should be made so that young people become bilingual and can speak in both English and French at 96%. English and French should continue to be taught in elementary schools across Canada at 98%. And that provincial territorial governments should make more spaces available in immersion programs at 87%. To me, this would suggest that many Quebecers do not necessarily see as incompatible the protection of French in their own province on the one hand, and the fostering of individual bilingualism on the other, certainly not when it comes to their own children. In Canada as a whole, 76% of parents of school-aged children in the online survey said that it was important to them that their kids have the opportunity to learn their second official language. Among the Quebec parents surveyed, it was 99%. 99%. It doesn't get much higher than that. Then again, this may reflect some of Francophone Quebecers' anxieties about the future of French as much as it does their interest in their children becoming bilingual. 89% of Quebecers said that being bilingual constituted a major advantage when it came to employment opportunities, which was well above the national average of 67%. It's one thing to want your child to become bilingual for cultural enrichment, but it's another to wish it when concerned that without it, they cannot succeed. But while they displayed significant support for federal institution bilingualism and for second language education, Quebecers also demonstrated noteworthy support for the English-speaking minority. Indeed, 90% of Quebecers agreed that children from the Anglophone minority community in their province should be guaranteed the same quality of education as children from the Francophone majority, even if it takes more resources per student. This was higher than any other region we studied. Les Québécois font également preuve d'une saine curiosité envers l'autre, si je peux m'exprimer ainsi. En effet, 69% des répondants auraient aimé participer à un programme d'échange linguistique à l'école pour tisser des liens avec les jeunes de l'autre communauté de langue officielle. Enfin, et retenons ce point, 65% des Québécois s'entendent pour dire qu'il faut mieux appuyer les communautés minoritaires anglophones de la province. Ce n'est peut-être pas un appui massif, mais c'est quand même une nette majorité. Bref, il s'agit d'un sondage à grande échelle et je ne fais qu'effleurer la surface. Beaucoup plus de données sont disponibles sur le site web du commissariat. En conclusion, et bien que les mois à venir puissent comporter des défis pour la communauté anglophone du Québec, gardons à l'esprit les chiffres dont nous avons parlé aujourd'hui, ainsi que les gens qui les représentent. En effet, ils sont la preuve et la manifestation de la promesse que le Canada tient en tant que foyer de nos deux langues officielles. La communauté anglophone fait partie intégrante du Québec depuis plus de 250 ans. Elle est intimement liée à la communauté francophone dans la courte pointe collective unique de la province. Quebec has a great advantage from having a strong Anglophone minority community, standing as an ally to Francophones as a proof that we can all work to protect and promote French in Quebec while protecting the linguistic rights of the Anglophone community. That is a feeling that is shared by the people we've had the pleasure of talking to while conducting our polling efforts. Please allow me to conclude by wishing you a productive policy conference today, including your discussions on the next action plan for official languages for 2023-2028. Thank you. Merci.